There will be spoilers ahead for White Christmas, and there will be spoilers for Black Mirror seasons 1 through 2. It's that time of the year again. The time where we gather around the fireplace, snuggle up with a warm blanket, grab some hot cocoa, and analyze one of the most nightmarish episodes of Black Mirror. 'Tis the season to have an existential crisis as we talk about White Christmas. In White Christmas, we follow Matthew Trent and Joe Potter, two men stuck in a cabin during Christmas with nothing to do but talk about what went wrong on the outside. In their exchange, we watch 3 mini-stories that reveal how they both ended up in that cabin. The first story shows us how Matthew would spend his evenings, working as a dating coach for dweeby guys so they can hook up with women they wouldn't normally have a chance with, using Zeyes, which is a more advanced version of the willow grain from the episode The Entire History of You. Matthew observes Harry's entire night and instructs him on what to do and say. Matthew is also accompanied by fellow colleagues tuning in to provide their insight, and some of them are most likely just there to watch. And by the way, when looking at some of the guys on the chat, one of them has the username I am Waldo, referencing the episode The Waldo Moment. Another guy has the username Pieape, referring to the insult the cyclist would call the janitors in the episode 15 Million Merits. And this guy, right here, is the director of White Christmas, Carl Tibbets, also known as Popcorn with a K. When talking about the inspiration behind the first story, the show's creator, Charlie Brooker, claimed, really the first story stemmed from an observation that literally everyone in the world had when Bluetooth headsets first became a thing. Walking down the street, you'd pass someone who seemed to be talking out loud to themselves, as if they had a mental illness, whereas they were actually conducting a hands-free call. It took a while to get used to, and I thought, could we do a story about someone with literal voices in their head encountering someone with delusional voices in their head? And during Harry's night out, the one thing that really caused his demise was talking to Matthew without knowing that someone with delusional voices in their head was watching him, giving Jennifer every reason to believe that she and Harry were in the same situation. In the second story, we see Matthew's actual job, as he works for the company Smartelligence. By the way, when Matthew makes Joe guess what his job was, Joe asks if he was a marketing person, which is a nice little nod to the fact that John Hamm, who plays Matthew, starred in the show Mad Men, playing a creative director at an advertising agency, also known as someone in marketing. Awesome references aside, Matthew already had a real job, but he helped dweeby guys hook up with women as more of a hobby. He must have wanted to live vicariously through them, since he is living a more boring and conventional lifestyle with a wife and kid, something that wasn't satisfying his love of figuring out people and how they operate while using it to his advantage. When Matthew is in Greta's house, we learn about cookies, not these cookies, but these cookies, and how each cookie is a digitally replicated consciousness of a human being. Matthew's job is to break down the cookie and make them agree to slave labor, so Smartelligence can sell a more personal version of a Google Home to its customers. Cookies are no doubt inspired by the cookies we use on our devices, as real cookies are pieces of data sent from a website and stored on whatever browser or device you're using. Most of the cookies the average person uses are made to log things like passwords, credit cards, addresses, emails, etc., etc. Pieces of data about you collected to make your life easier. Like how Greta's cookie is supposed to make Greta's life more manageable. In real life, some types of cookies are used to gather long-term records of someone's browsing history, which can be a security concern when it comes to hackers or Big Brother getting a hold of them. In this universe, cookies go a few steps beyond that, as they collect the entire history of you. Something I feel often goes overlooked when discussing Joe's interrogation is that in their world, any suspect who may have committed a crime automatically loses all their rights in the state as well as any basic human rights. The police forcibly extract everything out of Joe's head and puts it into an AI because he was under suspicion. This is a world where your thoughts are no longer safe. When told about Greta, Cookie Joe is unaware that what Matthew has been describing is the exact situation he is in, and there are a few details throughout the episode alluding towards the fact that Joe is a cookie in a simulation. When Joe is outside of the dad's house, there is a blinking blue light next to the license plate of his car, just like the blue light on the device that contains the cookie. As the story progresses, the shots between Matthew and Joe are framed more and more like an interrogation. There's a loud metal sound that pauses their conversation, and this can be interpreted as Joe's cell door closing. The clothing design showed us that Matthew is an outsider as he is wearing something much cleaner than the environment, while Potter looks like he belongs as he is dressed in warmer, battered clothes. Same way Greta's cookie was dressed to look like she belonged in her environment. Costume designer Sharon Gillam commented on the outfits of Greta and her cookie, starting with the real Greta, saying, "She aspires to live a zen-like existence, and so I put her in a kimono-like robe in her house. The virtual Greta's costume was made of neoprene, a fabric that is used to make diving suits. A man-made, robust, practical substance that fits perfectly into the world that has been created for her. Another detail I really like about the clothing design is how Harry's colored shirts have rounded corners instead of normally pointed corners, because the goal was to make a more subtle and believable future. In the third story, Joe finally opens up and reveals how his life fell apart, how he was in love with a woman named Beth, and their life together was pretty great, according to him, up until Joe pulls a positive pregnancy test out of the garbage. That looks like a less advanced version of the model used by Martha in the episode Be Right Back. When Joe confronts Beth, she says she's not keeping it, and in the middle of their argument, she blocks him. The next morning, Beth leaves, never speaking to Joe again. After learning that Beth kept the kid, Joe rightfully assumes it's his, and travels to her dad's house every Christmas to spy on their pixelated silhouettes. One day when Joe is on the couch flipping through the channels, we see the dancers performing on the show Hot Shots from the episode 15 Milli Merits. The channel after that has an interview with Selma, who is also in the episode 15 Milli Merits. Then the next channel he switches to has the show Waldo is featured on in the episode The Waldo Moment. When Joe finally arrives at the news channel of Black Mirror, UKN, there's a headline at the bottom corner of the screen reading "Former PM Michael Callow announces divorce," referring to the national anthem and confirming that Prime Minister Cowell's marriage fell apart. Next to that headline, the text reads "Victoria Spillane appeal bid rejected," giving us an update on Victoria from White Bear, another episode of Black Mirror directed by Carl Tibbets. There is also the headline "MP Liam Monroe claims Twitter account hacked," referring to the politician Liam Monroe from the Waldo Moment. Then, after all of that, an unblocked version of Beth appears on the screen, because she was killed in a tragic train accident. With Beth dead, Joe travels to her dad's house to see his daughter, only to find out that the girl wasn't his. During a moment of confusion and anger, Joe kills the dad by hitting him on the head with a snow globe. In a panic, Joe fled the crime scene, leaving Beth's daughter to die. Let's take a moment to talk about Beth. I saw that a lot of people weren't that fond of her, as some of you have so elegantly put it. Beth, and some people were more sympathetic towards Joe. Beth and Joe's relationship shares a lot of parallels with Liam and Fee's relationship in the episode The Entire History of You. Like Fee, Beth cheated on her partner and had a kid with someone outside of her relationship. Like Liam, Joe isn't given crucial information, causing him to take drastic measures to reveal the truth. In The Entire History of You, I side more with Liam, but in White Christmas, I'm more with Beth. While intoxicated, Liam trespasses in Jonas's house, where he then assaulted Jonas and held a broken bottle to his neck. When Beth was trying to find some sanctuary, she cheated on Joe with Tim and unintentionally had a kid with him. The point that I'm trying to make is that people do bad things. However, it doesn't mean they're a bad person. I'm not defending cheating or committing assault, but I do believe Beth was more in the right. Hear me out. When discussing Joe Potter, Charlie Brooker stated, "Beth is somewhat afraid of him. He's possessive and has an explosive temper. She's not a saint herself, it turns out, but for my money, he's the root cause of the problems between them." Joe was most likely an alcoholic. His drinking problem was one of the things that would cause him to lose control, something that Matthew takes advantage of to get him to talk. In the second scene during Joe's story, we see that he is an embarrassment, as he became irresponsible and reckless in public. Joe's destructive behavior in public could imply that his actions may be even worse in a private setting. At karaoke, Beth is singing "Anyone Who Knows What Love Is," recorded by Irma Thomas, a song that makes an appearance in every season of Black Mirror. Joe sings the rock song "Black is Black" by Los Bravos, while Beth sings something melancholy, immediately showing us that they are on two separate pages. Joe claims that things weren't perfection. These things never are, but we were really happy. Although every scene with Beth after the introduction shows us that she wasn't, revealing that Potter is as unreliable of a narrator as Matthew. From what we see, Joe couldn't control his anger. We watch him have sudden outbursts when he gets frustrated enough, so Beth must have not wanted to confront him or leave him because she was scared of how he would react. When Beth blocked him, saying that they would talk in the morning, Potter threw a vase across the room, shattering it against the wall. And after he was pushed far enough, he smashed a snow globe against her father's head. He lost control of his actions to the point where he murdered someone. Potter was dangerous. Beth had every right to leave, but the way she went about it was horrendous, as Beth fell victim to how easy it has become to block people and avoid your problems. Similar to the way we just block an ex-girlfriend, boyfriend, or someone annoying on social media because it just takes a couple of clicks and instantaneously the person and the problem are gone. With the advancement of apps and devices that are designed to make your life better and easier, this convenience of blocking any negativity will only worsen. Also, keep in mind that after one more encounter, Beth never heard from Joe again. Beth's father claimed that he destroyed the letters Joe wrote her, so she never got to see them, giving her a reason to believe that Joe accepted what she told him and moved on. I know the main question everyone is yelling through their screens right now is why didn't she just tell him the kid wasn't his? Tim could have played a big part in keeping Beth quiet about their affair, because Tim was still living a normal life with his partner Geeta, even though he was just as guilty as Beth in this situation. Beth's dad also explains to Joe she was a mess. She'd had to leave everything behind. For all we know, Tim could have been the one leading the cover-up. The only thing he tells Joe is that Beth turned in her resignation, and when Geeta tries to console Joe, Tim pulls her back, hoping that the situation would just disappear. It's revealed that the Joe in the cabin is a cookie, and Matthew is trying to get a confession out of it, in exchange for leniency on his sentence after he was caught hosting an illegal service and tried to cover up his involvement in the death of one of his clients. As Matthew got closer to the confession, the cabin slowly changes into the house Joe committed the murder in, starting with the clock on the wall of the fireplace and the Christmas decorations like the sign with Noel written on it getting put in front of the first aid kit. After Matthew exits the program and discusses how he got a confession out of Joe's cookie, he claims, "When he was first ingested, I tweaked the time preferences and made it seem like 5 years from his perspective. With this, there has been some confusion regarding how much time Matthew really spent in the simulation. Did he just spend 70 minutes with Joe? Or did Matthew speed up time with himself in the program and experience 5 years with him?" At the beginning of the episode, when Matthew is trying to get Joe to engage in conversation, he says, "Come on, what has it been, 5 years?" Something that Joe's cookie doesn't dispute. And later, Matthew claims, "Some might say that 5 years with me is punishment enough." I feel that these two lines are enough to make the assumption that Matthew spent the full 5 years in the cabin with Joe. However, Matthew does say that he made it seem like 5 years from Joe's perspective, not including himself, implying that Matthew's perception of time must have been a lot faster than Joe's. After the police receive Joe's full confession, one of the officers starts playing a Christmas playlist and sets Joe's cookie to experience 1,000 years a minute. With approval from his superior, the officer leaves the program running over the holiday. Joe's cookie will spend more than a day in the real world inside a simulation that is sped up to 1,000 years a minute. In a 24-hour period, the cookie will spend 1,440,000 years in that cabin, listening to the same playlist over and over again, starting with the song "I Wish It Could Be Christmas Every Day" by Wizard. With this technology, humans are capable of creating heaven on earth. But in White Christmas, humans are using it to create hell on earth. When the officer walks up to Joe's holding cell and tells Joe that his cookie confessed, we can see the white bear symbol on the plate of his cell, and the same symbol appears on the door to their office. The main character of White Bear is Victoria Scillane, a woman who used her smartphone to film her fiancé Ian Rennick murder a little girl. Victoria was imprisoned in a justice park, where their society created a scenario similar to the crime she committed, and made it a day for a family outing. Both Victoria and Joe were responsible for the murder of a child, and like Victoria, Joe's cookie will be reliving the same day over and over again, in a place that serves as a reminder of his crime. With the white bear symbol all over the police station and the fact that he caused the death of a child, the real Joe will most likely get sent to a justice park. Most of the day at the White Bear Justice Park consists of the park goers replicating Victoria's crime, finding joy and entertainment from torturing a human being who they see as a monster. The end of the day consists of those same people cheering on the anguish, then angrily screaming and throwing things at Victoria. All of that aggression and hatred we see in White Bear was condensed into the officer casually saying, "No, leave him on for Christmas." As loud as it was then, it is so quiet now. So what scares me the most about this episode was not the amount of time the cookie was being tortured, but how quick and effortless it was to send him to that incomprehensible punishment, as it has become as simple as just a few clicks on a screen. There is no answer to how we should feel about Joe's cookie, as these unnecessarily cruel punishments are meant to make us reflect on our humanity. A lot of people really don't care about cookies because they're just code, but scientists scientifically speaking, consciousness is produced by a gradient of chemical processes that happen in a brain filled with billions of neurons sending signals to one another. Your brain is basically an organic computer, so artificially replicating something like it doesn't seem impossible. The cookie has empathy. He understands the value of life and feels remorse for his actions. Half of Matthew's career was understanding humans and how they operate, yet he is able to manipulate Joe's cookie and get a full confession. Also, the cookie's confession was enough for a conviction. A cookie is closely mirroring a person but still lacks all of the rights a human has. There would be no need to torture something that doesn't think or feel. However, the officer sets the time to 1,000 years a minute, purposefully selecting an annoying Christmas playlist that the cookie will have to listen to for an unimaginable amount of time. The way they punish the cookie is more of a representation of how we dehumanize and separate ourselves from a criminal. If you just read a headline that some guy murdered a grandpa and left someone's daughter to die, you'd probably think to yourself, lock that man up for good, right? But when we see his side of the story, a lot of people seem to be targeting most of their hatred towards Beth, while feeling somewhat bad for Joe. Like Victoria, we are meant to sympathize with the criminal, and see that this situation is not black and white. The more I think about Matthew's punishment, the worse it gets. Matthew becomes blocked to the public. As he walks out into the busy shopping area filled with holiday shoppers, we find out the actual reason this episode is called White Christmas. Claire left Matthew and took custody of their kid, so Matthew could still be blocked by his wife, which automatically blocks his kid. So even if close family members were allowed to still communicate with someone on the registry, that option might not be available for him. Matthew's job was installing cookies in people's homes, but now no one will want a red anonymous blob entering their house. The man who was so charming and could talk his way through anything is blocked from any human interaction, unable to manipulate or deceive anyone ever again. Something that is further emphasized by his awkward encounter with this holiday shopper. He is living in a situation that is the polar opposite of Greta's cookie, as she was able to speak but couldn't move freely, and Matthew can move freely but has lost his voice. It's important to note that Matthew was added to the Peeping Tom registry for spying through someone else's Z-eyes. Matthew failing to report a murder wasn't even a factor in his final punishment. It was more of just a bonus reason. Something as simple as being a perv was enough to ruin his entire life. Charlie Brooker further commented on this, saying, Trent's punishment is surely not far off though. A bit like someone with a conviction on their record, which you'd see if you were Googling them to employ them. So it's a hellish representation of that going on in real time. Earlier in the episode, Matthew claimed, people want to be noticed. They don't like to be shut out. It makes them feel invisible. With humans being social creatures, this treatment can be seen as inhumane. And you could argue that this punishment is actually worse than prison. Joe is experiencing hell in a digital world, and Matthew is experiencing hell in the real world. This society is punishing their criminals by condemning them to total isolation, not wanting to further acknowledge or deal with their problems. In both punishments, there is no path towards rehabilitation and no way for the characters to redeem themselves. Matthew and Joe's suffering doesn't contribute to the betterment of their society. It will only worsen it. And that's all I have to say about White Christmas. Oh, and by the way, for anyone curious to know how Matthew would actually be living his life during his punishment, John Hamm said, I'm a big believer in redemption and forgiveness. So I think Trent should be punished, but also be able to access a path of redemption. White Christmas to anyone? And I would be so ready for a part 2. This is my last Black Mirror ending explained of 2019. I said it before, and I'll say it again. These are my favorite YouTube videos that I've ever made, and I can't wait to get started on more for 2020. So thank you all so much for an awesome year. Merry Christmas and happy holidays. And I'll see you after the new year in my next Black Mirror ending explained.